I installed a nanny cam to protect my stepdaughter. Then I saw what her mother was really doing when I left for work. The camera arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in discreet packaging. I set it up in the living room bookshelf, disguised as a clock, angling it to capture the main area where my stepdaughter Iris spent most of her time after school. She was 7 years old with dark curls and her father's green eyes, and lately she'd been coming to breakfast with bruises she couldn't explain. My wife Simone said Iris was clumsy, always running into things, but something in my gut said otherwise. I'd been married to Simone for 8 months, and in that time, I'd watched Iris become quieter, more withdrawn, flinching when her mother moved too quickly near her. I connected the camera to my phone during my lunch break at the construction site, where I worked as a project manager. The app showed a clear view of our cream-colored couch, the coffee table, and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Test recording worked perfectly. I felt guilty setting it up without telling Simone, but the bruises on Iris's arms last week had been shaped like fingers, and when I'd asked her about them, she'd looked at her mother with pure fear before mumbling something about falling off the monkey bars. The school had no record of any playground incident that day. That evening, I kissed them both goodbye at 6:30 in the morning like always. Simone was still in her robe, coffee in hand, looking beautiful and perfectly composed as usual. Iris sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, her small shoulders hunched forward. I ruffled her hair and told her to have a good day at school. She gave me a tiny smile that didn't reach her eyes. I walked out to my truck with my phone heavy in my pocket, already dreading what I might see when I checked the footage later. The morning passed slowly. I supervised the framing crew on a new residential build, reviewed material orders, and dealt with a permit issue that required 3 phone calls to resolve. But my mind kept drifting to that camera, to Iris's frightened eyes, to the bruises. Around 10:30 during a break, I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. The live feed showed an empty living room. I scrolled back to 7:15, right after I'd left, and pressed play. Simone walked into frame, carrying her coffee mug. She set it down on the coffee table and called out for Iris. My stepdaughter appeared from the hallway, already dressed in her school uniform, backpack on her shoulders. Simone told her to come sit down. They needed to talk before school. Iris moved slowly, reluctantly, sitting on the edge of the couch. What happened next made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Simone's voice came through clearly. "Did you tell David about falling yesterday?" Iris nodded, her eyes on the floor. Simone leaned forward, her voice dropping to something cold and precise. "And what did he say?" Iris's small voice responded that I'd asked if she was okay and she'd said yes. Simone smiled, but it was wrong, predatory. "Good girl. Remember, accidents happen all the time. Little girls fall, little girls run into things. And little girls who tell different stories make everyone very sad." I watched, frozen, as Simone stood up and walked behind the couch where Iris sat. She placed both hands on my stepdaughter's shoulders, and even through the camera, I could see Iris go rigid. Simone's voice continued, pleasant now, almost sing-song. "Your daddy would be so disappointed if he thought you were making up stories about me. He's not here anymore, remember? It's just us now. And David loves me. So if you told him something that made him not love me anymore, where would that leave you?" Iris's voice was barely audible. "Nowhere." Simone's hands tightened on her shoulders, and I saw my stepdaughter wince. "That's right, baby. Nowhere. No mommy, no David, no home. They'd put you with strangers. Is that what you want?" Iris shook her head frantically. Simone released her shoulders and patted her head. "Then we understand each other. Now get your lunch from the kitchen. We leave in 10 minutes. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the construction site, replaying the footage 3 times, bile rising in my throat. The bruises weren't from clumsiness. They were from Simone, and she'd been coaching Iris to lie about it, threatening her with abandonment, using me as leverage. The worst part was how calculated it was, how practiced. This wasn't a one-time loss of temper. This was systematic abuse hidden behind a perfect suburban mother facade. My phone rang. Simone's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but forcing myself to sound normal, I picked up. She asked how my day was going, chatted about needing to grocery shop later, mentioned that Iris had been picked up for school without issues. Her voice was warm, loving, the same voice that had told me 8 months ago that marrying me was the best decision she'd ever made. I told her everything was fine, that I'd be home around 6. We said our I love yous and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering how I'd ever believed anything she'd said. I needed evidence beyond this one video. I needed a pattern documented, needed to show this wasn't isolated. I also needed advice, someone who could tell me the right steps to take legally. I called my sister Lauren, who was a social worker for the county. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the concern in her voice immediately when I said I needed to talk about something serious. I drove to a quiet spot behind the building supply warehouse and told her everything. Lauren's voice went from concerned to furious in seconds. She told me to save all footage, not to confront Simone yet, and to document everything. She explained that if I went in without proper evidence, Simone could flip the script, claim I was the abuser, or that I was trying to alienate Iris from her mother. Family courts, she said, often sided with biological parents unless there was undeniable proof of harm. She gave me the number for a family law attorney named Gerald Thornton, who specialized in child welfare cases, and told me to call him today. I spent my lunch break in my truck on the phone with Thornton. He listened to the whole story, asked pointed questions about the bruises, the timeline, Iris's behavior changes. He said the camera footage was valuable but might face admissibility challenges depending on state recording laws. However, the bruises, the fear, the documented pattern, those built a compelling case. He advised me to keep recording, to take photos of any new injuries, to document everything Iris said or did that indicated abuse. He said if I had evidence of immediate danger, I could call Child Protective Services, but to be prepared for an investigation that would tear my household apart. I went back to the construction site and tried to focus on work, but every few hours I checked the camera feed. At 2:45, I watched Iris come home from school. She dropped her backpack by the door and headed toward the kitchen. Simone appeared from the hallway and asked how school was. Iris said it was fine. Simone asked if she'd talked to anyone about her bruises, and Iris shook her head. Simone smiled and said that was good, that they were a family and families kept things private. Then Simone did something that made my blood run cold. She told Iris to take off her school sweater. My stepdaughter hesitated and Simone's voice sharpened. Now, Iris. The little girl pulled off her sweater, revealing her thin arms. Simone walked around her slowly, examining her like a piece of merchandise, checking the bruises that were already there. She pointed to one on Iris's upper arm and said, "That one's fading. Good. No more short sleeves until they're all gone. Understood?" Iris nodded, tears streaming down her face silently. Simone's voice softened again, back to that false warmth. "I'm not trying to be mean, sweetie. I just want us to be careful. People don't understand how things work in families. They'd take you away from me if they saw these, and I can't lose you. You're all I have left of your daddy." She pulled Iris into a hug, and my stepdaughter stood there stiffly, not hugging back, just enduring it. I saved the video file and sent it to my personal email, then to Lauren, then backed it up to a cloud drive. Then I called Thornton again and told him what I'd just witnessed. He said it was enough to involve CPS, that withholding medical attention or manipulating a child to hide abuse was serious. He'd start drafting paperwork for emergency custody if it came to that. He warned me that once I made the call to CPS, everything would move fast, and I needed to be ready for Simone to fight back hard. That evening, I drove home with my stomach in knots. I walked in at 6:15 to find Simone cooking dinner, the kitchen filled with the smell of roasted chicken. Iris sat at the kitchen table doing homework, wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather. Simone greeted me with a kiss, asked about my day, told me dinner would be ready in 20 minutes. She was perfect, attentive, loving. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd never suspect anything was wrong. During dinner, I watched them interact. Simone asked Iris about her math test, praised her for getting a good grade, cut her chicken into smaller pieces without being asked. Iris responded to every question with single words, never made eye contact with her mother, and ate mechanically. After dinner, Simone suggested Iris take a bath before bed, and my stepdaughter left the room quickly, almost running toward the bathroom. I helped Simone clean up, loading the dishwasher while she wiped down counters. She talked about her day, mentioned running into a friend at the grocery store, laughed about a sale she'd found on Iris's favorite cereal. I made appropriate responses, smiled at the right moments, all while my skin crawled being near her. This woman I'd married, who I'd thought I loved, was systematically abusing a child, and had been doing it right under my nose for months. That night after Iris went to bed, Simone and I watched television on the couch. She curled up against me, her head on my shoulder, and I forced myself not to pull away. She mentioned that Iris seemed to be adjusting better lately, that she was less emotional, more stable. I asked what she meant, and Simone said Iris had been acting out after her father's death, being dramatic and attention-seeking, but she was finally settling down. She credited our marriage with giving Iris stability. I nodded and said nothing, thinking about that little girl crying silently while her mother inspected her bruises. Over the next week, I documented everything. I checked the camera feed multiple times a day, saving every interaction between Simone and Iris. I photographed the bruises on Iris's arms when I helped her get ready for bed one night, claiming I wanted to document them in case we needed to see a doctor. She'd looked terrified when I suggested that, whispering that she was fine, it didn't hurt. I'd hugged her and told her I just wanted to make sure she was safe. She'd hugged me back so tightly, I'd felt her small body trembling. The footage I collected over those days painted a horrifying picture. Simone never hit Iris on camera, but the psychological abuse was constant and devastating. She'd tell Iris that her father's death was partially her fault for being difficult the morning of his heart attack. She'd withhold meals, sending Iris to her room for minor infractions, then act concerned when I came home asking if Iris had eaten. She'd grab Iris's arms hard enough to leave marks, always out of camera frame, but I could see the grip, see Iris's face contort with pain. On the 5th day of recording, I captured something that made me call CPS immediately. I'd been reviewing the morning footage during lunch when I saw Simone drag Iris down the hallway by her arm after the little girl had accidentally spilled juice on the kitchen floor. The camera couldn't see into the hallway, but I could hear everything. Simone's voice, normally so controlled, was raised and vicious. She called Iris clumsy and stupid, said she was tired of cleaning up after her, asked why she couldn't be normal like other children. Then I heard a sound that stopped my heart. A slap, sharp and unmistakable, followed by Iris crying and Simone telling her to shut up, that David would be home in 8 hours, and if he saw her with a red face, she'd better have a good story about falling. I could hear Iris trying to muffle her sobs, hear Simone walk away, hear the bedroom door slam. For the next 3 hours on the footage, Iris stayed in her room, silent. When she emerged to get ready for school, her left cheek was visibly red. I called the CPS hotline from my truck, gave them our address, explained what I'd witnessed, and documented. The intake worker asked detailed questions about the injuries, the timeline, whether Iris was in immediate danger. I sent her the video files while we spoke. She said a caseworker would be assigned and would likely visit within 48 hours, possibly sooner given the evidence. She asked if I could keep Iris safe in the meantime. I said I'd do whatever necessary. That afternoon, I left work early. I called Simone and said I wasn't feeling well, was coming home to rest. She sounded concerned, asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no, just needed to lie down. I got home at 3:30, before Iris returned from school. Simone looked surprised to see me but immediately went into caretaker mode, offering to make tea, asking about my symptoms. I said I just needed to rest and went to our bedroom. From the bedroom, I could hear everything in the living room through our thin walls. At 4, Iris came home. I heard Simone ask about school, heard the usual exchange. Then Simone's voice changed, became sharp. Did you tell anyone about this morning? Iris said no. Simone asked if she was sure, if any teachers had asked about her face. Iris insisted no one had noticed. Simone said good, that David was home early today, so they both needed to be on their best behavior. I opened the bedroom door and walked into the living room. Both of them looked up. Iris's face brightened slightly when she saw me, then fell when she remembered she was supposed to be neutral around her mother. Simone smiled warmly and asked if I was feeling better. I said I was, just needed a short break. I asked Iris how school was, and she gave me her usual one-word response. But when Simone wasn't looking, Iris's eyes met mine, and I saw desperation there, a silent plea I'd been too blind to recognize before. I made dinner that night, insisting Simone relax since I was feeling better. I watched her interact with Iris during the meal, saw how she controlled every aspect of the conversation, how she corrected Iris's posture, her eating habits, how she held her fork. Nothing was good enough. Every correction was delivered with a smile, but there was steel underneath. Iris shrank smaller with each comment, and I wanted to reach across the table and pull her away from this woman. After dinner, I offered to help Iris with her homework while Simone took a bath. We sat at the kitchen table, and I helped her with math problems. After a few minutes of silence, I said quietly, Iris, I want you to know that you're safe with me. If anyone is hurting you, you can tell me the truth. I won't let anything bad happen to you. She'd looked up at me with those huge green eyes, and for a moment I thought she might say something. Then we heard Simone's footsteps, and Iris's face closed down completely. The next morning, a woman from CPS named Diana Kowalski showed up at our door at 9:30. I'd already left for work, but I'd set the camera to record everything. I watched the footage live from my truck, parked a few blocks away from my house. Diana introduced herself to Simone, explained she'd received a report of possible child welfare concerns. Simone's face went through a rapid series of emotions before settling on confused concern. Simone invited Diana inside, offered coffee, asked what this was about. Diana asked to speak with Iris, and Simone called her from her bedroom. My stepdaughter appeared in the living room doorway, saw the stranger, and immediately looked terrified. Diana introduced herself gently, asked if she could talk with Iris alone. Simone hesitated, then said, of course, she'd be in the kitchen if they needed anything. I couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but I could see Iris shaking her head repeatedly, see Diana showing her something on a tablet, possibly pictures of the bruises. After 20 minutes, Diana called Simone back in. She asked Simone directly about the bruises, about Iris's injuries. Simone's performance was Academy Award worthy. She expressed shock and concern, said Iris was clumsy, always getting hurt playing. She pulled out her phone and showed Diana pictures of Iris at various playgrounds, on her bike, doing normal kid activities. Diana asked about discipline methods. Simone said she believed in timeouts and taking away privileges, never physical punishment. She said Iris had been struggling since her father's death 2 years ago, acting out sometimes, but they were working through it together. She mentioned family therapy they'd supposedly been attending, though I knew that was a lie. Diana took notes, asked more questions, and finally said she'd need to make an additional visit and speak with Iris at school. After Diana left, I watched Simone's mask completely slip. She grabbed Iris by both arms and pulled her close, her face inches from my stepdaughter's. What did you tell her? What did you say? Iris was crying, saying she didn't say anything, she promised. Simone shook her once, hard. Someone called them. Someone reported us. Was it a teacher? Did you show someone your arms? Iris kept saying no. She'd been careful. She wore long sleeves like she was told. Simone released Iris and paced the living room. I could see her thinking, calculating. She pulled out her phone and made a call. From the one-sided conversation, I gathered she was talking to a lawyer. She explained that CPS had just visited, that someone had made a false report, that she needed advice. She listened, nodded, said she understood. After hanging up, she looked at Iris, and her voice was cold. We're going to get through this, but you need to be perfect. Absolutely perfect. Do you understand? I saved the footage and sent it immediately to Diana Kowalski, along with all the previous recordings and photos. I included a detailed email explaining that I was the stepfather, that I'd installed the camera specifically because of concerning injuries, and that I was witnessing escalating abuse. I said I feared for Iris's safety, especially now that CPS was involved. I gave Diana my phone number and asked her to call me urgently. She called within an hour. I explained everything from my perspective, the bruises I'd noticed, the fear I'd seen in Iris, the coaching and threats captured on camera. Diana said the footage was disturbing and would be valuable evidence, but they needed to follow protocol. She was scheduling a forensic interview with Iris at the Child Advocacy Center for the next day, where specially trained interviewers would talk with her away from her mother's influence. She asked if I could ensure Iris attended school tomorrow so they could pick her up from there. That evening, I came home to find Simone agitated and barely holding it together. She'd sent Iris to her room immediately after I arrived, saying she had homework to do. Then she'd turned to me, her eyes red, and said we needed to talk. She explained about the CPS visit, framing it as a misunderstanding, a malicious report probably from a nosy neighbor or someone at Iris's school who didn't understand their family dynamics. She was scared, she said, because CPS could take Iris away over nothing. I played my role. I put my arm around her, said it would be okay, that we'd cooperate with the investigation, and everything would be fine. She leaned into me, actually crying, and I felt sick touching her. She asked if I'd noticed anything concerning with Iris, any injuries that might have triggered a report. I said just the usual bumps and bruises from a kid being active. She nodded gratefully and said that's what she'd told the caseworker too. That night, after Simone fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Iris would be interviewed by professionals who knew how to talk to traumatized children, who could see through the coaching and fear. Tomorrow, the truth would start to come out in ways that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. I thought about Iris's father, about how he died 2 years ago, leaving his daughter in the care of a woman who was supposed to protect her, but instead was destroying her. The next morning, I made sure Iris got to school. I volunteered to drive her, saying I wanted to stop by the office anyway to drop something off. Simone had seemed relieved to let me take that responsibility. In the car, Iris was quiet. I told her that some people were going to talk to her today, and it was very important that she tell them the truth about everything. She'd looked at me with fear and confusion. I'd squeezed her small hand and said, I know you're scared, but I promise you, I'm going to keep you safe. Diana called me at 11 to say Iris was at the Child Advocacy Center. The interview was being conducted by a trained forensic specialist and was being recorded. I asked if I could be there, and she said not during the interview, but she'd call me with updates. I spent the next 2 hours unable to focus on anything. I sat in my truck outside the construction site, staring at my phone, waiting. Diana called at 1:15. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. Iris had disclosed extensive abuse, both physical and emotional. She'd described being hit, grabbed hard enough to leave bruises, locked in her room for hours, denied meals as punishment. She'd talked about her mother telling her that her father's death was her fault, that no one would believe her if she told, that David would stop loving her if he knew the truth. The forensic interviewer had noted that Iris showed classic signs of abuse, including dissociation, fear responses, and practiced lying to protect her abuser. Diana said they were moving forward with emergency protective custody. Simone would be notified today, and Iris would not be returning home. They needed an emergency placement, and since I was a step-parent with no biological or legal relationship to Iris, I couldn't automatically have her placed with me. But Diana said, given the evidence I'd provided and my clear concern for Iris's safety, they'd consider me for emergency kinship placement pending background checks and a home assessment. I asked where Iris was now. Diana said she was still at the center with a victim advocate, waiting for placement to be arranged. She was scared and asking for me. Diana said if I wanted to come down, they'd allow supervised contact. I was in my truck and driving before she finished the sentence. I arrived at the Child Advocacy Center 20 minutes later and was led to a small room where Iris sat with a woman in her 30s holding a juice box. When Iris saw me, she ran across the room and threw herself into my arms. She was crying, saying she was sorry, she didn't mean to tell. She tried to keep the secret. I held her and told her she did nothing wrong, that I was proud of her for being brave, that everything was going to be okay. The advocate, whose name was Bethany, said Iris had been very strong during the interview. She said they'd be working on finding the best placement for her, and that I should expect a call from the placement coordinator. Simone called my phone at 2:30. I stepped out into the hallway to answer. Her voice was hysterical. CPS had just left the house. They'd told her Iris was in protective custody and wouldn't be coming home. They'd said there were allegations of abuse. She was screaming that I needed to come home right now, that we needed to figure out who was lying about her, that someone was trying to destroy their family. I said I was dealing with something at work and would be home when I could. She demanded to know where Iris was, and I said I didn't know. By 4, I had emergency kinship placement approval. My background check was clean, my home assessment passed, and Diana advocated strongly that I was the appropriate placement given my relationship with Iris and the evidence I'd provided. They brought Iris to me in Diana's office, along with the few belongings they'd collected from the school, her backpack and jacket. Diana explained I'd have temporary custody while the investigation proceeded. There would be court dates, evaluations, ongoing casework. Simone would have supervised visitation rights if she chose to exercise them. I took Iris home, but not to the house I shared with Simone. I went to my sister Lauren's house where I'd arranged to stay temporarily. Lauren had already set up her spare bedroom for Iris, with fresh sheets and some stuffed animals. When we walked in, Iris looked around cautiously, and Lauren knelt down to her level and introduced herself. She told Iris she was safe here, that no one would hurt her, that she could ask for anything she needed. That evening, I called Simone. She answered screaming, demanding to know where her daughter was. I told her Iris was in protective custody and safe. She said I'd done this, that I'd called CPS and lied about her. I said I'd documented the truth. She switched tactics then, became pleading. She said she knew she'd been too hard on Iris sometimes, but she was grieving and stressed and she'd never seriously hurt her. She asked me to bring Iris home and they'd work it out as a family. I said there was no family anymore. I told her I'd seen everything, that I had footage of her threatening Iris, coaching her to lie, inspecting her bruises. I said I'd seen her slap Iris and heard her tell a 7-year-old child that her father's death was her fault. Simone went silent for a long moment. Then her voice changed completely, became ice cold. She said I'd regret this, that I was destroying a mother's relationship with her child, that she'd fight this with everything she had. The next few weeks were chaos. Simone hired an aggressive defense attorney who tried to paint me as an opportunistic stepfather trying to steal her child. They claimed the camera footage was obtained illegally, that I'd manipulated the situation, that the bruises were truly accidental, and I'd coached Iris to lie. The strategy fell apart when the forensic medical exam confirmed a pattern of injuries inconsistent with accidents, and when Iris's statements remained consistent across multiple interviews. The criminal investigation moved parallel to the family court case. Simone was charged with child abuse and endangerment. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was pushing for jail time given the severity and duration of abuse. Simone's parents showed up at court claiming I was lying, that their daughter would never hurt anyone. They didn't look at the evidence, didn't want to see the videos or hear Iris's testimony. Through it all, Iris slowly started to heal. She had nightmares the first few weeks, waking up screaming for her father. Lauren and I would take turns sitting with her until she fell back asleep. She was in therapy twice a week with Dr. Patricia Lansing, a child psychologist who specialized in abuse trauma. Dr. Barbara Lansing said Iris showed signs of complex PTSD, but was resilient and responding well to treatment. Iris started smiling again. Small things at first, laughing at something on TV, playing with Lauren's dog. She started wearing short sleeves as the bruises faded. She made friends with a girl down the street and asked if they could have a play date. She started calling me David again instead of just staring at the floor when I walked in the room. She drew pictures in therapy of our new house with Lauren and labeled it Safe Place. The family court hearing lasted 2 days. Simone's attorney presented character witnesses who spoke about what a devoted mother she'd been before I came into the picture. They tried to argue that the stress of remarriage had caused temporary problems that could be addressed with counseling. The prosecutor showed the videos, showed Simone threatening her daughter, coaching her to lie, slapping her, showed medical evidence of repeated abuse, called Diana Kowalski, who testified about Iris's fear and the forensic interview disclosures. I testified about what I'd witnessed, about the bruises I'd seen, about Iris's change in behavior. I talked about installing the camera because my gut told me something was deeply wrong. Under cross-examination, Simone's attorney tried to make me look suspicious, asking why a stepfather would be so invested in a child that wasn't his. I said because she was a 7-year-old little girl who deserved to be safe and loved, and someone needed to protect her since her mother wouldn't. The judge's ruling was decisive. Simone's parental rights were suspended pending the outcome of the criminal trial. I was granted temporary guardianship of Iris with a path to permanent guardianship if Simone's rights were eventually terminated. Simone would have no contact with Iris until she completed a court-ordered treatment program and evaluations determined she was no longer a threat. The judge said the evidence showed a pattern of calculated abuse and that Iris's safety was the paramount concern. Simone's criminal trial happened 4 months later. The jury convicted her on 3 counts of child abuse and 1 count of child endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in jail, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. When the sentence was read, Simone finally broke down completely, crying that she loved her daughter and never meant to hurt her. But it was too late. The damage was done, documented, undeniable. 2 years later, I was sitting in family court for the final guardianship hearing. Iris, now 9 years old, sat next to me holding my hand. She'd written a letter to the judge saying she wanted to stay with me permanently, that she felt safe and happy, that she didn't want to go back to her mother. Dr. Lansing testified that returning Iris to Simone's care would be psychologically devastating and potentially dangerous. The judge terminated Simone's parental rights and granted me full legal guardianship. Iris squeezed my hand so tight when the gavel came down, and when I looked at her, she was smiling with tears running down her face. In the hallway afterward, she threw her arms around me and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." I held her close and promised I'd never stop. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.